Hi, well, welcome. I feel awfully great that so many of you came out today to hear me talk about something that I love to talk about. I am a fantasy author, and as any good fantasy author knows, world building is essential. Not only is it essential, it's so much fun. We're really drilling down deep into the ins and outs of a society that exists only within the confines of your head. Sounds kind of crazy, but it's really an excellent exercise in before you start any book project. I know when I was growing up, I was a voracious fantasy reader, and the ones that I loved the most is because I was drawn in by the world. I got to escape what I was doing, whether that was homework or siblings or bullies or whatever, and was drawn in by the force of someone else's imagination. So today, I'm going to talk a little bit about how I go about some of my world building process. And there's really not any one way that works for everybody. It's something that you're going to have to experiment with over time. See what works for you. But here are some things that might kind of get your creative juices flowing, and some things that you might consider when you're starting on your world building endeavor. So I want to start, I like to do a lot of discussion too, so please don't be shy. Tossing it out there, what is one of your favorite worlds, and why do you like it? Over here.
I personally, one of the books I really started getting into that really drove me to actually want to start writing is Fablehaven.
Sure.
And at least one of the things I really did like about it was that it's just, I didn't really have to try to wrap my head around a completely alternate world. It's still our world, but there's separate corners that man really doesn't normally touch that are the safe haven for a lot of these mythological creatures.
Sure, and I call that kind of a hybrid world building, where it's pieces of our world, it's mostly our world, and then we're introducing some fantastic elements. There's really a world within a world.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Yes, right here.
I love Robert Asprin's work.
Okay.
He did the Mid-Adventure series, where he went through and, it starts in a fantasy kind of medieval world, but it moves to all sorts of different things. There's one that he goes to an old western.
Oh, fun.
One where he goes to one of the major worlds they go to is the world's Eva, and it's like this giant bazaar where everybody tries to sell you everything. And you
nice.
want to make sure that if you go there, you just make sure that you have enough money, because otherwise you're just going to get screwed.
Okay, that's good. A little variety, is what I'm hearing.
I really love the variety.
And it's based, and you see, one thing that you said, actually one of the first steps we're going to talk about is that it has shadows of truth. It's based on the Old West, or it's based on medieval times, or whatever. Right up here in the front.
I don't think we can talk about world building without mentioning Brandon Sanderson, because...
Amen to that.
So, for me, it's how vibrant and unique they are.
Good. So you have bits of the familiar. You also have bits of the strange. You have something that's like, oh wow, that is really different. Right there in the back of the floral print.
So it's not a book, but I don't know if it's... Oh, I'm sorry. It's okay. Go ahead. Yeah.
It's okay. You and then you.
Okay. It's not a book, but I don't know if anybody's familiar with the show Shuffle. So basically, it takes place in Japan, but there are gods and demons coming from different portals, and they all look cool together.
And they all look together. So
it's fun. I like it.
I like that it twists your expectations a little bit. You've got gods and demons and homework. Yeah, so you see that is a little bit of humor. Yeah, that is an effective world building tool. And then yes, your neighbor there.
I really like The Name of the Wind by Patrick.
I did enjoy that as well.
It sounds like everybody's beautiful work. I love the world building there. I love how the magic system works, and I love how you can feel the music that he's playing. I got tears, tingles, all of it, from reading that book, and I just love that it's based on a very real world. There's dirt and there's trees and there's
yeah, exactly.
But he brings in the magic. I don't know.
Yeah, I like that one too because he focuses a lot on the folklore too. He talks about not only the story that the reader is reading, but the stories, the stories within the stories in the world, the myths that are important to them. We say it in the same way that maybe Grimm's fairy tales or Aesop's fables are important to us as storytellers. He's got his own world of stories within stories. So that's really interesting. So I'm going to have to cut you off there. I'm sure we could talk the whole time about this, I'm sure. But when I get started, whenever I'm building a world, I always, whether some people are notebook people, some people are Word document people. I keep everything digital because, man, my handwriting. Yeah, I'd have to oh, I'm inventing a new language. Oh no, that's just me. Sorry.
There's a presentation on that later.
Yes, there is one. Yes, of course there is. Good. The first step is to decide how much of the real and how much of the strange you're going to introduce. So when we're talking about fantasy, you see a lot of fantasies that are based on European kings and knights and wizards and whatever. You see some that are based in, I've seen some that are based in Asian cultures, feudal Japan, China, something. I've seen some great fantasies that are based in sort of Scandinavian culture, where you're talking more about like Valhalla, yeah.
Like you're saying, the contrast / the comparison between, how much you're going to be using of each, real as in just what we can expect, like what we can normally see in this world, what we can kind of expect, really?
Yes, so how much, there are certain conventions. Okay. So like if you're taking a medieval European-based fantasy, there are certain conventions. When your reader starts reading this, they think, oh, there's probably going to be knights and a king and an evil wizard or a good wizard. You need to decide how much you're going to play to the conventions and how much you're going to subvert the conventions, I think. So kind of getting, for example, I started this one. I had the idea that I was going to use several of these. There's one world, and there's 3 different major tribes. There's a catastrophe that happened to the world, and so humankind is banded together in 3 tribes. And each one of them kind of has a different feel. One of them feels kind of European, one of them feels Middle Eastern, and the other one feels kind of Scandinavian. I kind of, with the names that I gave the people, with how they're dressed, so I'm kind of alluding to some of these things in the real world. I encourage that to a point. You want to have things that people can latch onto, to draw them in. When you're reading fantasy, there's a learning curve. Yeah, your world is, you know all the rules, you know all the places and the people, but the person that is reading your book is seeing this for the first time. You want to have some familiar that they can latch onto and introduce the strange to that. It's the familiar that kind of starts them on the path, and it's the strange that keeps them there, and keeps them there, and keeps them there. Especially if you're kind of subverting these kind of preconceived notions that you're talking about. The second thing that I often talk about is we want to talk about the values. And you might think, that's kind of weird. The values of the people? When you're reading a story, you like all the great things. You like all the scenery, you like the characters. But it's the conflict, it's the plot, at least for me, that it's the story that is really going to draw you in. And if once you know not only what your society as a whole values, but also your characters are the sort of things that they're going to value, then you can understand what sort of conflicts are going to arise. For example, in The Hunger, it's based in a place where every single person has to consume magical sustenance and cast magic every day, or they become mutated. You neglect your magical meals too often, and you become a twisted sort of monster-like thing that people have become the kind of subservient class of the society. And so it's these people, it's the rich who can afford the high-quality food, and it's the poor who have to kind of scrape by. One of my main characters is very poor, and the other one is very wealthy. And we've kind of they have different conflicts based on their values. But one's more kind of fight, flight, survive, and the other one is more, gosh, I'm this sort of person. I don't like the kind of person I am. How could I be a better person? It's what they value that is going to tell you what the conflicts and what that's going to drive your story. The third thing that I focus on is then, I've got these great conflicts, I've got these great values. I did some more work for it to happen. And there's two kinds of geography that we're going to talk about. The first is your physical geography. You do need to think about, what my realm looks like. How many kingdoms or clans or whatever are there? Are there big mountain ranges? Are there rivers? Because a lot of times, you might not think about it sometimes, but a lot of times the actual physical geography shapes the plot. If you think about Lord of the Rings, there's a mountain in the way, right? They have to pass through the mines of Moria they try to go over the mountain, doesn't work, they have to go under the mountain. The physical geography of Middle-earth is integral to the plot. You have the placement of Mordor, where the Shire is, the rivers they have to cross, the mountains they have to cross. So, and when you're thinking about it, thinking about it also in terms of how does this affect my characters? How does this affect the plot? Always coming back to the conflicts and the things that they're going to have to overcome. So you don't just like, oh, well, it might be nice if there's a mountain there and maybe a lake. That'll be scenic. I can describe that later. That's nice and all. But, and I don't go overboard, but I kind of sketch it out. You can kind of play with that as it goes along. Some people are big, map builders and take all their time building the map. You need to know about it, but you maybe don't need to know every single thing about it. The physical geography, though, also needs to inform the political geography, is what I call it. Is what kingdoms are there, what tribes are there, what people are there, and how do they interact with each other? How has that interaction changed over time as well? Is extremely important to talk about. And often the physical geography, that's why I do this first, informs your political geography. If you look a lot in history, a lot of times physical barriers such as mountains and rivers were also political boundaries. So that the country was here, the river divided them, or the mountains divided them. And because these two countries are on either side of the mountain, they don't really fight all that much. But then, oh no, this new guy comes up with a way to easily cross the mountain. And so for the first time, these two countries are butting heads. Or maybe they're playing nice and they're trading with each other. There's all these different things so everything is kind of connected to each other, and one thing informs the next thing. But for example, in the Hungers, I mentioned I have these three tribes. And for a long time, they've kind of just been in survival mode. There was a cataclysm, people are kind of just they're banding together, trying to survive, trying not to, just trying to get from day to day. But now, they've entered a sort of a period of more prosperity. They're forgetting some of their kind of their core values, and they're becoming greedy. They're kind of looking over and say, hey, those guys have some pretty nice things over there. But there's three of them. They have all three, and so they're kind of putting out political feelers to see, okay, if two of us gang up on the third one, we could probably win. But if we need to know that beforehand, so we go after this guy, and then we don't know where the third guy's going to go, who knows how it's going to turn out. So some of these things that I considered in my political geography. The next thing that you want to consider, so you've taken a big look. You've taken a bird's eye view of your society, of some of the aspects of your society. I also encourage you in your world building to then take a smaller view. To go from the great big magnifying glass, or the great big Hubble telescope, to the microscope. To think a little bit about your characters and some of these things about their daily lives. I always ask myself, what's my daily life like for my protagonist or my protagonists? my important characters. And you want to make sure that you give the most information about the most important characters. If you're reading along, and all of a sudden the author takes a paragraph or two to really drill down on somebody and tells you all these things about him, that's a signal in your mind, hey, that person's important. I need to listen to this. Something's cool or awful is going to happen to this character pretty soon, or somewhere down the road. But if you do that and then you don't do anything with that character, you kind of feel cheated, right? Like, why did I need to know that? Why was I starting to invest in this character if you're not going to take it anywhere? So drill down into their daily lives. What do they do to support themselves? What sort of challenges do they have? What's their family like? What's their relationship to the people that are closest to them? Who are the closest people to them? Are they close to their family? Are they close to their friends? Are they close to some other group? And then talking about taking the values of society as a whole and talking about their own values. Do their values align with society? Often, their values don't align with society, and that is where your conflict comes in. So you can talk about their daily life and find the ways where there's friction. The friction is where you can write those interesting stories. The things where they are now and what they want to change. Either about themselves, about their society, about their lot in life. It's this idea of what do they want to change and how do they think they can do it. They need to be given, at least to have a hope that they can, and then that kind of informs the rest of the story. And then, so kind of once you've drilled down onto that, I like to talk about what I call the secret sauce. And when in speculative fiction, whether it's fantasy or science fiction, or even something else, usually have a secret sauce. And either that's your magic system, that's your technology system, that's something that is going to, in some way, influence your plot. And we mentioned Brandon Sanderson before, and I really like what he says about magic systems, is that the more you know about your magic system, the more you can use it in your plot. The more that your readers understand the rules, the mechanics, the ins and outs of it, the more you can use it to actually solve problems with your characters. And there's two schools of thoughts on this. You need to decide whether your secret sauce is going to be the mysterious secret sauce, or the Colonel's blend of 11 secret herbs and spices. That it's there, people like it, it's interesting, but it's also mysterious. If you think about Lord of the Rings, how much do we actually know about the magic system in Lord of the Rings?
Nothing.
Like nothing, yeah, seriously, Gandalf, he's got his cool staff, and when he needs light, he just says, he gets light.
And then he does nothing else.
Yes, or when he needs to call the Eagles, he's got them on speed dial. Save us!
Oh, are you kidding? He just dropped a passing ball.
Yes, Eagles ex machina, exactly. I think that's what
Can't really explain anything. How do moths come up with giant eagles?
Big bulls have
They
wings.
fly.
See, and then they got
That's not moths.
wings, yeah, they're brown? I don't know. But so, in that, the magic's just kind of this big, it's a presence. But how satisfying is it when Gandalf solves the problem with his magic? Not very, is it?
It's like, oh, look at that, you did it again.
Like, oh great, now we're up in the tree. Flaming pine cones! Cool. It's cool to a point. But if it's overused and it's super mysterious, you're just kind of like, oh great, the magic showed up again. It can kind of subvert what you're trying to do, to show how clever or strong or interesting your protagonists are to get them out of their problems. Over here, yeah.
I don't want to divert the conversation too much. If any of you want to read a really good soft system where they don't explain it but it blends really well, check out Black Kidney by Glenn Cook.
Oh, yeah.
Or Uprooted by Naomi Novik. They do a great job where it's not explained, but it doesn't.
It's still interesting.
It doesn't ruin any of the moments.
I like that. So good. Just, it can be done well. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying understand the pitfalls of going into it. So, if you're going to have a soft magic system, like you said, one that's not very well explained, just don't always make that the one-note thing. Oh, they saved him with the magic. Oh, again, next chapter, you bet. Saved by magic. And then we have, so it's kind of more what Brandon Sanderson does, where he creates very concrete rules. So you have these different kinds of metals, and each metal, when you burn it, does this, gives you this kind of superpower. And there's certain people who can, and there's certain people who can't. But now, since you understand all the kind of the mechanics of, oh, this metal brings objects to me, this one pushes it away, this one makes people angry, I can cause people to be angry or soothe them. That way, when his characters are in a pickle, they can be like, ooh, okay, let me think about them. They can solve it being clever or being strong, or because they put in the time and the effort to become good. And so they're like, ooh, hey, that's satisfying. That's like if when I have a problem, I do something really clever or cool, I feel good about myself. When we're putting ourselves in the protagonist's shoes, it makes you feel good about yourself because you're experiencing it vicariously. So take some good time. Decide whether it's going to be more of a soft system or a hard system. And know and understand the reasons why you're doing it. Or do we have a question over here? Yeah.
No, I actually had a comment. When you're talking about how Brandon Sanderson had rules for his magic, I also like how he also had consequences from the magic.
Oh,
if you use too much pewter, if you use too much strength, you're going to collapse afterwards, or you could die from using too much of it.
Exactly. It is much more interesting when magic has limits. If you can just say, I can just kind of do everything with my magic and I'm Superman. Superman's a great character, but he's also like, you have to really dig for someone who can actually like hurt him or kill him or put him in danger. If your character is too overpowered, it's just not as interesting. There needs to be some peril. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one way to balance having a really OP system for magic is to make it really, really hard, because there's this, I can't remember what the book series is called, but in the magic system, the main character can make anything he wants from his imagination, but it's really hard because you have to know the entire layout. He can make books or a house because it's easy to understand, but a car he has a hard time with because there's so much stuff and it's so complicated.
System, yeah.
He can't do it unless we're to really study, so it makes it an OP power more interesting when there's that limit.
Yeah, there has to be a price of admission. And that price is either going to be some sort of physical strength, I've used it too much, I'm taking something from my body, and there's a finite amount of it, or it's a mental thing where you have to study, you have to train, whatever it is, there needs to be a price of admission, or else you do risk it being overpowered. Absolutely. And so, it's interesting, when you're talking about world building though, you also need to think about what it is, that all these individual things are going to be, all these different steps. You need to think how you are going to present this to the reader, and what, out of all of it, you're going to present to a reader. A world is enormous. If you think about our world, there's hundreds of countries that you will probably never see in your entire life. There are languages that you will never hear in your entire life, and people, the food that you will never eat. That's just one world. That's our world. And the bounds of the imagination are truly astounding. And even think about long series. You think about, say, Harry Potter, 7 books long, and with some other things on the side. But how much of that world do you really know? We know about England. We know a lot about, our British witches and wizards. There's the whole rest of the world out there. You kind of hints that there's a broader world out there. Now, we saw the film where we saw some American witches and wizards. But J.K. Rowling decided, okay, I've got this massive world, and I know so much about it. After the books come out, she's telling us more about it. She gets on social media and says, this is about, tell me today more about this character and that character and what they did afterwards. And she knows it all, but she decides to focus on a very specific part of it. You are not going to be able to include everything about your world. And you shouldn't try either. That's it. That would be overwhelming. Sorry, did you have a question right up here?
Oh, I was just going to say, sometimes when you are that big of an author, because she has Pottermore, where she has different, long articles, huge things about all the different, countries and how their history is, and you sit there and you're like, how long would the books have been if she had decided that all of this was important enough to go in?
Exactly. So you have to focus. And it's so fun. So I often just go to town. I talk about whatever I can about my world building. I talk, the people, the cultures, the plays they go to, the music they listen to, the books they read, the games that they play, the stories that they tell each other. All of these rich, vibrant details is the last step that I want to talk about. Is find the most interesting and vibrant details that inform your readers about your world. So it's kind of fun to throw these things in here just to be, gee whiz, look at all the homework I did. Look at all the, how complicated. Well, that's nice. But you want to be able to say, okay, I'm throwing in the story in there because it tells you about the values of the characters that you're reading about. I'm showing that he reads this book because it shows about his motivations, what's important to him. The kind of people, maybe he's reading this book because he idolizes the protagonist and wants to be like that protagonist. So you can use these things, these details about your world, to show about the conflicts and about the characters. And those are the most important details to figure out. Out of all your pool of details, you don't and shouldn't include everything that you know as an author, but it should inform what it shows up on the page. Yes?
When you're thinking about creating a world, it can be really hard to avoid those cliches, but I think that if you try to avoid the cliche, it almost becomes more, because if you're like, okay, in fantasy, there's a knight, so I'm going to throw in something like completely opposite, and then it becomes so confusing and so unfamiliar that there isn't anything that you connect to, so you use those cliches sparingly and you pepper them in, and so people go, oh, I know this, like I can understand and connect to this, and so the rest of it makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah, I completely agree with you. You kind of have to play with the ratio of familiar to strange too. And some readers, it's just, they have a threshold. It's going to be too strange, and that's okay. Then maybe that's just not your target audience. That's okay. Not everybody is going to love everything that you come up with.
Something I struggle with a lot is, as a writer, you know everything about all your characters.
Oh yeah.
And based on that, you will sometimes put stuff in that things your character does that the readers don't necessarily know about. And I find it really hard not to do that, and it gets kind of confusing sometimes.
That's true. And see, that's where I kind of my revision process comes in. That's why it's so important to have as many people as you can get eyes on it and ask them specifically. Tell me where you're confused. Tell me where their actions did not make sense, or I didn't understand the world, your world. Ask them specifically what about it is confusing, because I run into that, especially as fantasy authors. Yeah, you're like, oh, I totally get the magic system. I'm like, of course you did that because you can explain it to yourself, but you're not there holding your reader's hand, being like, oh, you're on chapter 2? Oh yeah, you can't sit there and explain it to them. Yeah.
I have noticed that there are a lot of books. Green Rider was a very, very big example of this. When you get to the end and all of a sudden stuff happens, and then you kind of get to the last chapter, you're like, wait, what just happened? And I've noticed that happens a lot in fantasy and science fiction. And so, I mean, do you think that there's a way around that? Can you get some sort of big giant climax where you may not know exactly what is going on because it's supposed to transcend all of that?
Yeah. How
do you explain that?
So that's also something I do a lot in my revision, is making sure that I spaced out the world building. I peppered it in a layer throughout the book. Not just it's really easy at the beginning to kind of, especially for newer writers, to just say, okay, I'm just going to tell you everything up front, and kind of just go on for pages or paragraphs and pages. We call that the info dump, and that's it's really tempting to just go out and tell everybody about it. I found it's more effective to find ways to work that in kind of in between, in smaller chunks, in between the action, and doing that consistently, and maybe sometimes, and then reminding them kind of in the middle of your book, introducing some elements in the beginning, reminding them, but not in page form, just little bits here and there throughout the book, and as you sprinkle that in, the ending doesn't feel quite so mysterious or weird or sudden.
Well, I mean, what if something does happen that transcends what we have the ability to describe? Because, I mean, I think that that's a lot of what happens in, like, say, Lord of the Rings when Gandalf fights the Balrog.
Sure.
We don't know what happened.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if we can understand it. I think that that's what he
Oh,
was
okay. I
actually
see
going for.
what you mean.
Yeah, so how would you grab clarity when you are describing something that you may not have the vocabulary, that we may not have the three-dimensional understanding to actually understand?
You know what? I would do it through the eyes of your characters. I would see if something that is inexplicable or crazy happens, show how your characters are reacting to it. Show how they deal with it, how they struggle to grasp it. Because if they see that the characters, and not just you, it's not just you as the reader who are like sitting here spinning your wheels. If you see that the characters also find it inexplicable, I think that goes a long way to help them feel, okay, there's some things that I'm not going to understand, or that I might understand later, or unfortunately if you can't explain everything, that's just kind of unfortunately how it works. And in the real world too, you bump up against lots of stuff that you try to comprehend, you try to deal with, but you just can't. But show your characters doing it. Show your characters reacting to it, and I think that goes a long way to help your reader be sympathetic to it. Back here.
Something I struggle with is, where do you stop world building? Because there's a point where Tolkien worked on one world for the entirety of his career, and that
was it.
lends a huge richness to that world, but at the same time, so little of it is directly relevant to the story he was telling. And if we want to make a living as writers today, we have to actually tell more than one story. It's never going to work.
So true.
So that's in line with what aspects are presented to the reader. Is when do you decide, okay, I have enough aspects that are not presented that lend richness, but I need to stop now so that I can continue working on other things.
Sure, and I get to a certain point, thank you. I get to a certain point where I decide I am going to start. But I'm not going to stop world building. It doesn't have to be one or the other. You can start on your story, and often I find that that's actually super helpful to start on your story. And then some of the things that happen in the story then inform your world building. You find like, oh, you know what? I don't know how he would react in this situation. Or like, and then I take a pause and I drill down on it. And I find out as an author, and then I keep going. I find sometimes a simultaneous is really the best approach, because then something you said about momentum. You start, get going, it helps you be excited, seeing chapter, even some progress, a little bit of progress goes a long way in helping you feel motivated to work on the project. And so, I do both. Other questions? They said, tell me I've got 5 minutes. They're ending up early because they've got to take down these walls.
What was number 6 and 7? I got 1 through 5.
Okay, so we have, sorry.
Can you just go through all of them?
Yeah, you bet.
Yes,
let me go. Let me take my computer back if it's not going to cooperate, and I will tell you in order.
Just so we know what.
Oh, absolutely. You bet. Okay. Awesome. Okay. First, what are the shadows of reality? How much reality? How much do you base on other things? Number 2, what are their values? What are their scarcities? What makes life worth living? What are the conflicts that arise from these values and scarcities? Number 3, what is the physical geography? What are the major geographical features? What are the climates and biomes of your world? That makes a difference. What are the natural boundaries that affect the people who live there? Number 4, what is the political geography? What nations, kingdoms, or tribes inhabit your world? What's their relationship to each other, and how has that changed over time? And what are the potential conflicts that arise between these groups? And what do these conflicts then mean to your characters? If you don't get everything down too, I also am going to make this available to you as well. So I'll tell you about it in just a sec too. But take some notes anyway. Number 5, What is daily life like for your protagonists and important characters? More information for more important characters. What conflicts do they have with society, themselves, and other people? What does he or she want to change?
That's it.
That's 5. Sorry. Number 6. What are the most interesting and vibrant details of your world? Adding a few fascinating details goes a long way. Remember to hit on emotional draws such as wonder, horror, humor, adventure, romance, those things that provoke a strong emotion in your readers. And one thing I ask myself is, what would a person from our society who got dropped into that world notice right away? Be like, oh my gosh, everyone's singing. Something like that. And number 7, what is the secret sauce? Your magic system, your technology system, whatever it is that you use to solve the problems, whether it's mysterious, a soft system, or it is well-defined, a hard system, or somewhere in between, and how that affects the conflicts and what goes on in your story.